The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 911FreeFall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and tonight we're going to be talking about developments happening in the 9/11 Truth movement. We got a lot of very high-profile people coming out of the woodwork talking about World Trade Center 7. And of course, that is one piece of the entire issue called 9/11 Truth, the issue that we have been championing for a long time. God knows I have been. And World Trade Center 7, of course, is the smoking gun. Most people watch that building come down. They see the symmetrical fall. They see the speed with which it comes down. And they know there's a problem with that official story, that random organic office fires cannot possibly make a building do that. We have all sorts of folks from Jimmy Dore to RFK Jr. speaking out now and unafraid to share their doubts about the 9/11 official story. But I noticed some things, and by the time the show airs, we're going to have an article out highlighting this because this Peter Bergen guy, this is a guy who was interviewing RFK Jr. at the time that this whole issue came up. He brought up the issue himself. I mean, if he wants to stifle discussion of 9/11 Truth, why bring it up in the first place, right? So I've noticed some patterns here, and around election time, certain candidates who have a 9/11 Truth following or a certain segment of their following that may be on our side of things, of our persuasion and questioning the official story, they try to use those supporters against the candidate and give them this ultimatum, if you will, live on the air. But we'll get into more discussions about that. And tonight I am bringing on my mainstream media expert, Mr. Craig McKee. Now, he's been a journalist for more than 30 years. He covers news and entertainment. He's won 8 provincial and national weekly newspaper awards. He has not one, but 2 websites now. One of them is truthandshadows.com. The other is called Thought Crimes and Misdemeanors. It's a very long web address, but it's basically thoughtcrimesandmisdemeanors.substack.com. We're going to be getting his take on things today, so let's go ahead and bring him on in here. Craig, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you very much, Andy. Glad to be back.
All right. So you're freezing up a little bit on me there. But there we go. Very good.
Okay. That might have been just, me, not the computer freezing. That could always happen,
You got lost in thought for a minute.
I'm intimidated by being on the show with you, I think.
You should be, because look at this set. I've got the 90s Tim Burton vibe going on here. I want to put a new thing on the screen behind me each time. Unfortunately, I meet this diner thing, but now my head is blocking the cool part of it right there. Yeah. It says AE 9/11 Truth at the top. I need to put more thought into this and not do it quickly right before the show, but we're going to have a new graphic up behind me each time.
I decided to go with the blank white wall look because I figured that's my level of technology that I can manage. So
if it was glowing a little bit more, it'd have a Kubrick-esque quality to it.
Whoa, that would be, wow. I would be happy with that. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I always think about what filmmaker's world that I occupy in from moment to moment. Anyway, so RFK Jr. was on a podcast and he got asked about 9/11 Truth. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to be going over a lot of clips today. Back in 2012, me and Bernie Suarez, when he was helping me host the show, we went through all of them and gave our thoughts on it. Not a very good quality episode because we were just getting started. It was all audio and all of that. Some of those clips are really long, so we're not going to use them. And plus, the Debra Medina one is already going to be featured in the article by AE 9/11 Truth. So I'm not going to play that one, but we will be discussing it. If you want to hear the clip, go to that article and listen to that. But what was the genesis of this entire discussion today was this. RFK Jr., he's running for president. He's challenging an incumbent in his own party, much like his father. And Biden's not very popular these days, if he ever was at all. So anyway, he is that what the definition of a dark horse candidate is? I don't know. But anyway, let's go ahead and play the clip.
You mentioned 9/11. The official explanation of 9/11 you buy?
Which is what?
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
I don't know what happened on 9/11. I mean, I understand what the official explanation is. I understand that there is dissent. I have not looked into it. I haven't examined it. I'm not a good person to talk to about it.
Well, I mean, so there's doubt in your mind that Al-Qaeda was responsible?
Well, I don't know. I know that there's strange things that happen that don't seem...
What are the strange things?
Well, one of the buildings came down that wasn't hit by a plane. So, it wasn't Building 7 or Building 10.
That collapsed because two of the world's biggest buildings collapsed on top of it.
No, they didn't collapse on top of it. My offices were down there. My offices were closed.
So one of the buildings next to the Trade Center...
No, there's pictures of it collapsing. There's nothing collapsing on top of it. I mean, listen, I don't want to argue any theories about this because all I've heard is questions. I have no explanation. I have no knowledge of it. But what you're repeating now, I know not to be true.
To clarify, yes, I could have been more precise here. The government's official report found that Building 7 was hit with debris from the North Tower. That impact caused fires, which led to the building collapse. It's very well documented, and there's nothing strange about it.
Nothing strange about it, Craig McKee.
Oh boy, well, that's a fascinating clip, and you can sense a couple of things happening there. One is RFK really I don't think he sees this as a winning issue for him. I don't think he thinks that this is gonna he's gonna make a lot of political capital maybe by going out on a limb and saying that the official story is false, but I think he's hinting that he's more than hinting. He clearly is expressing doubts, and the explanation, I was very happy to hear him push back on that bogus comment from the interviewer, where the interviewer said, well, it was crushed by the other two buildings. Well, I bet you most people who don't care about 9/11, who just swallow whatever they're fed, I bet you most people would not even realize that that's factually inaccurate. We know that the building came down, what was it, 8 hours later or something like that. We also know it's so obvious that if to the extent any debris hit it from, the nearest tower, there's no way that could have initiated a symmetrical collapse, part of which was at free fall acceleration. There's no way. And maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the damage to the corner of the building that we did see in photos is not even on the same end of the building as the first column that is credited with being the kind of initiation of the whole thing. And so the idea that the falling debris brought down Building 7, it just doesn't stand up to scientific examination, not at all.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth. They say the collapse initiated on the opposite corner of where the building had the minor damage. Even NIST acknowledges that it didn't play a significant role in bringing the building down, talking about the damage on the corner there. It's right in their FAQs. What you have here is two people who don't really know a lot about the subject. One has some common sense, and the other one has an agenda. And it sounds to me now, when I'm listening to this again, that this Peter Bergen guy, who's an analyst for CNN, so that says enough to me right there, because anybody that's an analyst for one of these big wonky networks has an agenda. They're going to reinforce the official story. So it sounds like that was taped afterwards when he comes in at the end and he gets the official NIST story. Yeah,
definitely.
So,
which is a kind of a devious kind of a tactic, and I've seen this done in other cases where somebody will be asked a question like that, and then later on, details will be filled in to sort of, ridicule the interviewee after the fact, kind of a deal. I mean, I think RFK has serious doubts about this story, and he might actually, if you got him privately, he might actually say that he doesn't believe the official story. I mean, he's far enough along the way towards that I think that's probably the case. But I also think he probably sees that there's a bit of a political minefield there, and we've seen. I mean, we know from how people are treated when they even dare to even raise questions. We see what happens to people like that and how they're ridiculed. But I just hope that after all these years that the average person watching an exchange like that has learned a thing or two and can recognize this kind of silly tactic for what it is. But I don't know. I think some people do and some people don't, and we need more people to recognize it, because it's a tactic that's been used all the way along. It's like you don't respond to the factual nature of comments. You kind of ridicule them and you say, oh, that's ridiculous, and oh, everybody agrees that that Al Qaeda did it, and these are tactics. These are propaganda tactics. And one can only wonder about the interviewers and whether they're, how many of them are actually following a script and doing what they're told, and how many of them are they've just absorbed this. They know that if they want to keep their jobs and, do well and rise through the ranks, that they better not step into any areas that are off limits,
Well, it's absolutely a strategy, especially the robotic interruptions. I dealt with this one time. We had a supporter who wanted me to come on to some kind of Twitter conference, and I thought it was going to be some small, intimate thing with maybe 5 people, and I go on there, and there's like 100 people on there, so I'm like, oh, wow, best behavior. And I go on there, and I'm doing the whole thing about the controlled demolition, the presentation, and there's somebody in this audience who manages to break through and is trying to interrupt me at every moment. It's like, NIST acknowledged free fall. No, they didn't. And they're always like a few volume levels above whoever they're interrupting, sort of like Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. It's like, whoa, and I just laughed because the guy's just denying what like NIST acknowledges, and the host wasn't having any of it. He chucked him out. But this is a technique. When they can't argue you on facts, they'll just sit there and try to interrupt you with this fake assertiveness. Right. And just, deny saying that this backdrop here is black. They'll say, no, it isn't. It's white. And they think that somehow you're going to be intimidated. It's not going to work on people who've been in this movement for over a decade. We've seen it all. But no, this is a strategy, and this is something that they absolutely do.
Your claim, Andy, your claim that your background is black was debunked years ago.
That's true.
That was all. There's a scientific consensus that you have a white background, not a black background.
That's true. Well, I guess if you could take the images from the TV screens and whatnot. But seriously, so RFK Jr., obviously we support what he thinks about 9/11. He hasn't looked into it too deeply, but he can watch Building 7 fall, know there's a problem with that story. And we don't endorse any particular political candidate, at least as an organization. Privately, of course, we do. We're human. But I will take anybody that will help our cause. Now, what's interesting about this is that when Trump was running back in 2015 or so, he made some comment, vote for me and you'll know how the towers, or who took the towers down, something to that effect. He also had made some comments either the day after 9/11 where people think that he's talking about controlled demolition, that he thinks it's controlled demolition, but that's not exactly true. He was making the argument that the airplanes couldn't penetrate the exterior of the building. Yes, they could. So it's not really in support of controlled demolition so much as other theories that I don't think are credible. However, people thought Donald Trump was going to be a truther. He's going to get in office and do something about this issue. Instead, he surrounded himself with a bunch of neocons like Bolton and Giuliani, and that's what happened. So, I guess I want to know, your thoughts on that whole phenomenon about people thinking Trump's the truther, but also what do you think is better for the truth movement? Trump or RFK Jr. getting in there? Now, neither of them probably will. We'll probably have Joe Biden sleeping through the White House for another 4 years. But if we had to get one in there just for the sake of 9/11 truth, no other issues, what do you think is better for our cause?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think, with RFK, I think there's a lot of things he has to say that I think are, I think he's got integrity, and there are some things I don't agree with him on, and other things that I very much do. I think he's brought a lot of sanity to the whole, COVID vaccine thing. But, as far as 9/11 goes, it's hard to know, because sometimes people that seem like they're going to be very, there's real potential there that they're going to, they're going to open the door to some truth. If they're actually in office, then they've got so many other considerations in terms of the playing politics. I would hope that he would. I would, if you asked me to choose, I'd probably say RFK. Because I think if Donald Trump was going to do it, he would have done it in the 4 years that he was in, and if I'm not mistaken, that we were expecting some JFK assassination documents to come out, and I believe that those ended up being kept under wraps beyond the time that we were expecting. So I don't have a lot of confidence that Trump would lead us to some sort of 9/11 awakening. So given that choice, I'd go with RFK. But based on the way he answered that question, I see a lot of hope, but I also see him being very politically careful, because he doesn't want to be, because what the media will do to people when they hint that they might be open to questioning the official story is that, they'll use that as a way to bash them over the head, in terms of their credibility. Like they'll just, that's what the mainstream media does. It just ridicules. And it's all about crushing dissent. It's all about it's just one of a number of tactics that are used by the media to stifle dissent. Ridicule is one of them. In the case of this exchange, it's amazing how often if somebody expresses even a little bit of openness to a challenge to the official story, the host doesn't just disagree with them. The host has to jump in and almost talk over them and just like, no, you're wrong. Like not even, common courtesy doesn't even really exist, So
beyond that,
I don't know if it's a long roundabout way of answering your question, but I guess what I just heard from RFK would give me some hope anyway. But it's hard to know what politicians are going to do when they get into power.
Well, so I sent you the old show from 2012, and you said you sat through it for the hour and a half, and it's going to be cited in the article by the time it goes out. But Debra Medina, she was running for Texas governor back in 2010 against Rick Perry. Rick Perry, very much an establishment Republican at the time. We were starting to see what became the Tea Party, even though the Tea Party got taken over by the Republican Party. It's another issue. But we started to see the early grassroots of that forming, and so you could say that Debra Medina was sort of a product of that. Constitutionalists challenging people on the state level, and she very much represented this. So what she attracted were people that didn't trust government on many issues, including people in the 9/11 truth movement, who were behind her. There was a lot of excitement and steam behind her. Then she goes on Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck ambushes her with questions about 9/11 truthers on her campaign team, of whether or not she believes the official story. Debra Medina didn't really give a very solid answer. So what this did is this put her in a spot because she wouldn't go out and say, yes, I believe the official story of September 11th. The mainstream media jumped all over her and panned her as a, quote, conspiracy theorist, as a truther. But also, too, a lot of her supporters were upset that she didn't just, plant her feet in the ground and say, no, I don't believe the official story of September 11th. And I feel bad for what happened to her because it really was a debacle for her campaign. Now, again, I'm not going to play it because it's a long clip, but you can go to our YouTube channel by this time and you will see it. But what do you think about that whole exchange?
Well, she was, I don't understand how any politician in a situation like that can be caught off guard. You'd think that would be something you would be ready to answer. And she didn't do, I think she didn't do terribly. She kind of pushed back a certain amount, but it wasn't a very strong pushback. And I'm not really that familiar with her, where she stood on 9/11. If she was an out and out 9/11 truther, then yeah, she really wimped out there. But it certainly wasn't. It wasn't a complete sort of cave in kind of thing, because she did sort of say that. I'm trying to remember now what she said about her, people on her staff, like we can't do we're not going to do psychological testing on everybody, which in a way that could be taken a couple of ways. In a way, it sounds like, that the people, on her staff that are 9/11 truthers need psychological testing, but at the same time, it's like she's saying, well, we can't read everybody's mind. We can't know every single opinion they have. But it was a bit of a political answer in the sense that she was trying to not be damaged by the insinuation, I guess. So it was a bit of a wishy-washy kind of thing, but it wasn't the worst answer I've ever heard from a politician.
No, and that's why I feel so bad about what happened to her, because I don't know her personally, but she seems like a nice lady when you see interviews with her and all of that. And it's almost like you have to have a superhuman vigilance about you when you're running for office or even doing this work, like representing AE 9/11 Truth, because everything is a gotcha. Every tiny little thing that they can find, they're going to try to use against you, associations, whatnot. To me, the best opinion or the best way to go about it is to just not care, to simply just move forward and stand by it, own it, no matter what. And I think that wins out in the end, because, again, it alienated her supporters. And ultimately, if she doesn't win the governor's race, which she didn't, at least, maybe because you got that strong backing, you can come back later. Maybe you can run for Congress or do something else. And I'm not criticizing her, because this situation, it's like we're an American public that sort of for many decades has just sort of trusted the political class to manage our affairs. There's certain types of people that want that kind of thing. They love the adulation. They love all the cameras on them. They love people hanging on everything that they say. And we've just kind of deferred all of these big decisions to that class. But then they started running us into a ditch. And then things like 9/11 happened. We're obviously not getting the real story. And regular people now had to try to join that class, and they're just not ready for the den of vipers that's waiting for them. And man, you get to the high levels of anything, and you got some real slime balls there who rise to the top in many instances. Believe me, I know. So I feel bad. I feel bad when people are just trying to do the right thing get hurt. And yeah, should she have been more vigilant? Yeah, it's a lesson for all of us out there. But I have also noticed too, and this is the point I'm trying to make, and I tried to make in the article, that's going out is that when you have a political candidate who is open-minded, because I noticed that she says things, there's questions that haven't been fully answered, but they're not as involved with like the 9/11 issue as we are, right?
Right.
So they're not going to know the official story that NIST gives and why that's wrong. They just know that there's some questions that haven't been answered and they're open-minded to it. It's almost like the media puts them on the spot where they have to make a choice. Are you either with us, the 9/11 Truth Movement, or are you with the bad guys? And
that's exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I do have a short example of that. Now, they did this to Ron Paul, and Ron Paul says he doesn't agree with us, and we can always speculate, does he really mean that or not? I'm just going to go, based off of what he says. But this was an interview with Glenn Beck. I got a lot to say about Glenn Beck. He's tried to reinvent himself as some kind of champion of freedom and all of this stuff. He is still that same weasel that was attacking 9/11 Truth 10 years ago. But regardless, but Glenn Beck was like the leading attack dog of the mainstream media against the 9/11 Truth Movement. And every time when elections would come up or whatever, Ron Paul was gaining a lot of momentum, had a lot of 9/11 truthers behind him. And here's Glenn Beck trying to confront Ron Paul and get him to disavow 9/11 Truth.
I don't know how you address people who are so deeply into conspiracy, but can you?
I don't know what I would be supposed to be doing. No, I don't think there's any evidence.
Is there any evidence or is there any doubt in your mind that the United States government was not involved in the September 11th attacks, that we did not bring down World Trade Center number 7?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that is true. They did not. But the connection may be.
So, and I noticed this too, there was another clip, and unfortunately I couldn't find it, but it was during one of the Republican presidential debates. I think it was 2008, could have been 2012. Those are the two times Ron Paul ran for president recently. But I think it was Chris Wallace who confronts him on the debate stage with a question about 9/11 truthers in his campaign, almost wanting him to, again, disavow this segment of his supporter base. And either way that it goes, it serves the system, because either he says he has questions about 9/11 and the mainstream media can use this as an excuse to attack him, or he alienates a certain portion of his base. And I saw this too, even when we were doing the C-SPAN campaign. On the other side of the aisle, Bernie Sanders, one of our supporters, really loved Bernie Sanders and was gushing about him to him when he got on the air, asked him about Building 7. Bernie Sanders gave the same standard response, and the host, Peter Slen, almost had this smug look on his face, like, there, your hero is just throwing you under the bus. What do you think of them apples? So, I don't know. What do you think about this this strategy of using us against possible, open-minded candidates when elections come up?
Well, I think it's done as a way of. I think the journalist, if I can, I use the term loosely. It's like, I think they think they're going to win either whichever way it gets answered. If the person says, well, I think there are some legitimate questions, well, then you can go after them and discredit them and ridicule them and interrupt them. That seems to go with it. But if they say, well, no, I'm totally, as Ron Paul said there, I totally believe Al-Qaeda did it. Then he's in a position where he's either got to throw his own people under the bus. I honestly don't know what the point is of being elected to a position of leadership if you fail a test of integrity like that. I'm not referring to Ron Paul specifically, partly because I didn't some of that clip, it tended to freeze a little bit on my computer, so I didn't get every word that he said there. But I think it's like kind of a no-win question for somebody that actually thinks they have a chance to win something, because either we saw with the Texas situation, either you kind of throw your own people under the bus, or you hurt your campaign because you're being exposed as one of these kooky truthers. So it's a tough spot to be in, but it's hard. I find it hard to respect a politician that will will choose political expediency over truth. I think, what's the point of being in politics unless you just want to have a pension for life after whatever number of years it is, and you just want to be in power for selfish reasons. I find it hard to respect politicians that will do that, but it does take a certain amount of courage to stand up to these bullying interviewers.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Now, people will make the argument. We're going to use Ron Paul as an example. Now, Ron Paul's whole deal is it didn't start off with 9/11 or anything like that. Since, I don't know, maybe the 80s, he's been champion for libertarians, right? And so he's worked through the Republican Party, but his whole thing was end the Federal Reserve, get us out of these entangling alliances, non-interventionism, sound money. Those are the platforms of Ron Paul and what he has been going after for his entire life. Then 9/11 happens. There's some questions about it. Now, I don't have any clue what Ron Paul's personal views on 9/11 are behind the scenes. But let's just say hypothetically, he agrees with us that it looks like a controlled demolition. Now, the argument that could be made by his campaign staff would be that, look, we've been going after the Federal Reserve all of these years. That's our main issue. We think we can solve some of the problems that may have resulted in 9/11 by going after that. Right or wrong, that's what they think. And we have to keep our eye on the big price. I mean, the same as we do. Other issues come up that we may question personally or whatever, but we don't get into it because we keep our eye on our mission, which is controlled demolitions of the 3 towers in New York. That is what our supporters pay for us to do, and that is what we do. So we do that. So a politician could make the same argument that, well, I'm looking at the big picture here. I'm doing what I have to do to win, to keep on being that voice for what I believe in. Do you sympathize with that kind of internal compromise at all?
Yeah, I do actually sympathize with it. But I think the difference between you made reference to like AE 9/11 Truth as being, an example of kind of focusing on a particular issue, and you don't necessarily want to be dragged into other issues. I think the difference is that politicians they're asking to represent all the people on all the issues. I mean, they're if Ron Paul became president, he might well have to decide whether to further investigate 9/11. I mean, so I completely sympathize, because the way the media propaganda works, you have to really be able to withstand, kind of an onslaught of criticism if you dare to touch this issue. And I don't know about most, it seems like the majority of people out there, just average people, it's hard to get people to disbelieve what they see on their TVs. A lot of people are very suspicious of government, and good. I think we need more people to be suspicious of government. It's what the media has got a lot of power, and it's hard to fight against that. It's hard to, have the media kind of unanimously against you and still win. But I think, if you make if you make too many compromises, then by the time even if you do eventually win, of course, Ron Paul didn't win, right? So, would it have been so much worse if he had just, no, I don't want to use him as a good example there, because maybe he legitimately believes the official story. So it's not really fair to put that on him, but, we know there are some people that have doubts about the official story, and I don't know. I to answer your original question, yes, I'm sympathetic, but at the same time, I've seen enough weaselly politicians just kind of say whatever they think is going to get them votes, and kind of demonstrate a lack of integrity. I mean, I really enjoyed. I don't know if you're going to play this clip or not in later on, but the Jesse Ventura thing. I don't know if I should
talk about it because I don't have that ready. So
okay, all right, good. Well, yeah. So Jesse Ventura, got on Piers Morgan's show, and he was, I mean, he's the most, kind of blunt of the person that I've seen, in a mainstream interview, with basically just saying, well, the official story is, wrong. And I remember him saying, I think Piers Morgan said, well, you make a lot of crackpot points. And then Jesse Ventura turns to the audience and he says, well, do you think I'm making crackpot points? And he says, or do you think I'm making good points? And then the audience all applauds. So, I mean, full marks to Jesse Ventura for that. He didn't try one of these weaselly answers, this sort of, well, we certainly, might want to think about asking some questions or whatever, and I just thought that was great. We need more of that. I'd rather see a politician just show the courage of their convictions if they are their convictions. And, if you lose, you lose. I mean, most politicians end up, when you run for president, chances are you're going to lose because there's usually a whole field of people. And I don't know. It's a tough situation because the media is like an army that's coming in against you. And all we can do, I think, not only is to raise awareness about 9/11 truth and all the details, but to raise awareness of how dissent is suppressed and how journalists, and I hate even to use the word because my background's in journalism, and frankly, when I listen to some of these people, it's embarrassing, and I don't consider myself to be in the same field as them. They're propagandists. They're not journalists. A journalist wants to get at the truth, and if you want to be a journalist, you don't end up on CNN or some major network like that, because by the time you get there, either you already believe all the official lines, or you better act like you do, otherwise you're not going to last. So anyway,
well, I want to ask you about another phenomenon here that I've seen. So earlier in the year, it was this year, Tucker Carlson was on some podcast somewhere, and he said something very supportive of us. Now, in the past, I won't say he was hostile, but he was dismissive of our issue, Building 7, 9/11 Truth, all of that. And, was part of the problem. And now he's come out and said he was wrong, right? So we write an article simply saying that it happened, that he said this, that we commend him for speaking out, talk about it on your show. He still had his show on Fox at the time. And we get some complaints saying, you're in bed with Tucker Carlson now. How dare you? I'm on the left. I don't like Tucker Carlson. I don't care if he said something supportive of 9/11 Truth. Don't mention it. Don't tell anyone about it. And I said, wow, what happened to nuance here? What happened? I mean, what would happen if Shyam Sunder got visited by 3 ghosts and had a change of heart the next morning and ran through the streets in his bedclothes saying, oh my God, I support a new investigation. We whitewashed this entire thing. And he agreed with us. Now, what would we say? Screw him. Screw him. He's from NIST. He said unkind things in the past. I would hope the 9/11 Truth movement would be trying to get him on the phone and putting him out front saying, see, he disagreed with us. Now he agrees with us. So to me, this seems ridiculous. You know, we're a non-political organization. We try to represent both sides fairly, equally. When I talk about people, if they're Ron Paul or Bernie Sanders, I talk about them with no judgment on what their political positions are. And we are going to welcome anybody who steps forward. You know, I mean, if it was O.J. Simpson or something, no, but if it's somebody that disagreed with us and now they've had a change of heart, we're gonna talk about it, because we are in the business of persuading people, of changing hearts and minds. And so those are my thoughts on that phenomenon. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think Tucker Carlson is a very strange case to me, because I remember watching him on Crossfire on I guess that was CNN. Yeah. Like back in the day, and with his bow tie. And I remember just thinking, I hate that little Weasley guy. You know, I mean, he was just smug all the time, and his politics didn't really line up with mine. But, you know, who knows what lines up with, you know, things are so upside down these days in terms of politics. Like but I didn't like him at all. But in the last few years, like, he's been saying things on his show that are just like, to the point where I wonder, like, why is he even allowed to say these things? Like, he's made, you know, what some comments that people were getting upset about, you know, Ukraine and Russia and the Las Vegas shooting and all kinds of things that just you would never have imagined would be discussed. I mean, you wouldn't imagine they'd be discussed on a you know, a network show or a cable network show. But even less so would you expect the host of the show to be saying them. I mean, you might expect to see the odd interview once in a while, but he was saying things that just were putting him kind of at odds with the rest of the media. So I think the idea of saying, well, let's not get in bed with Tucker Carlson, that's just silly. I mean, truth is truth. I mean, if he's speaking the truth, great. You know, it's better late than never, Tucker. You know, we're glad to have you. And it's important to have people who have that kind of profile. You know, if we're always seen as being sort of the outsiders, the fringe people, which is what the mainstream love to paint us that way. You know, it's hard to get over that credibility barrier, you know, because they can, you know, it's easy for the mainstream media to discredit us if we're perceived as being outside of that reasonable mainstream middle ground that they're pushing. So when somebody who's from the inside says something like that, I mean, we should be thrilled. And I don't think it matters if Glenn Beck turns around and says, I'm a 9/11 truther tomorrow, then, you know, that's great news, because that means that he's kind of disavowing all the, you know, the stupid things he said in the past. You know, I mean, it's better to get somebody to say the truth now, regardless of what else they say. I mean, you know, maybe O.J. Simpson is the exception. You know, maybe that's not really going to boost things a lot. Just like there were times when, you know, I'm not sure that Charlie Sheen was that helpful, you know, because, you know, he allowed it. He made it possible for people to associate, oh, he's one of those conspiracy theorists, with erratic behavior, which is, you know, kind of played right into the hands of the media, you know.
By the way, I just want to jump in and just establish that I've never heard anything about O.J. Simpson agreeing with us. I don't want people to hear us talking about it as if this is something that happened and the media picks up on it.
Yeah,
I'm just using that as an example because, in my opinion, that guy got away with murder. But, you know, Glenn Beck, I'd be a little more suspicious of him. If he came out and said he was a 9/11 truther, it'd almost be like Superman. It'd be like, what's your play, Luthor? You know, but... well, actually, let me play the clip. This is a clip. I had some fun with these graphics. I don't forget attacks on the truth movement. I remember everything everyone did. So there was a Holocaust museum shooting. Some guy, I don't remember all the details of it, but somebody went to the Holocaust museum, killed some people. He got arrested, and Glenn Beck comes out with this.
One of the, Mike, let me go to you. One of the guys, or one of the groups that I've been warning about for a very long time are these 9/11 truthers. It is the information that we have at this point is this guy is a hero in the 9/11 truther community. Don't know if that's true or not. That is the early report. These are people that, I mean, it's totally fine to speak out against the Fed, but these are whacked out conspiracy. The government has planned 9/11, the Jews were involved, etc., etc. And from what we have seen in early reports, this guy is being held up as somebody, they liked him because he'll actually do something about it.
Yeah.
When it comes on shore, there's going to be a go, go, go mentality. And that's what this is. There is a mentality in our enemies. Our country is now vulnerable. Those people who would like to destroy us, our enemies like Al-Qaeda, they'd like to destroy us, and they will work with anyone. There are also people like white supremacists or 9/11 truthers that would also like to destroy the country. They'll work with anybody they can.
There you go. That is some pretty dark associations this man is putting the 9/11 truth movement in bed with. I mean, talk about being in bed with people. White supremacists, the Holocaust museum shooter. Folks, there is no truth to that whatsoever. I remember just almost falling out of my chair when I heard this. I was, I was still only a few years into the 9/11 truth movement. And these kind of associations have been used to attack us. So, I even put out an article for AE earlier in the year, when Glenn Beck was talking about some of the FBI foreknowledge of the hijackers being here, dipping his toe in the water, and people are now saying, you're in bed with Glenn Beck. It's almost like it's trendy to be bombastic now. It's like you have to pick black or white. There's no nuance whatsoever in our society at all. Just pointing out that it happened. I don't trust Glenn Beck further than I can throw him. But what do you think about what you just heard there?
Well, I mean, guilt by association is one of the tactics that's frequently used. The association of 9/11 truth with what he's implying is anti-Semitism. That's a frequent one. I remember that. I remember when I wrote articles for my blog on when the founder of AE, Richard Gage, spoke in Canada, and this journalist up there, Michael Corrin, was kind of going after him, and I actually ended up filing a complaint with the regulatory agency that because he was accusing Gage of being crazy, and he used the anti-Semitic thing in a big way. So that's a common tactic. It's guilt by association, and everything is kind of like it's like cartoonish. The attacks are kind of cartoonish, really. They're like they're aimed at like 12-year-olds, and the surprising thing is that an adult can listen to that and be influenced by it or agree with it, because it's so obviously just kind of throwing names, like name calling, and it's so simplistic, I guess is the way I put it. But guilt by association, I mean, you're one of those 9/11 truthers, therefore, and you're discredited until you can somehow rehabilitate yourself. And there have been so many examples over the years too of people who are accused of other acts of violence, which may also raise suspicions in the minds of people about what the real purpose of the event was. But a lot of them have been identified as 9/11 truthers. And an example, the young guy that was convicted of the Boston Marathon bombing, he and his brother were both identified as 9/11 truthers.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's been done a lot, and one has to look at each event on its own merits. But I think there have been, this is not an accident, that so many people are linked to our efforts.
Well, we get crazy people sent after us too. Like, let's just say hypothetically Michelle Obama decides to run for president. Because I find it hard to believe they're going to run Joe Biden again. But maybe they will. But let's say she runs for president.
He's going to lose if they do.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's so outward now. The system is manipulated, and I don't know. But I won't get off into the political stuff. But let's just say she runs for president, and some person with some deep issues shows up at her campaign or goes and volunteers for her to hand out brochures, and then this person's got some kind of crazy worldview where they think that it should just be hardcore communism. And let's say they start harassing conservatives and they show up at Rand Paul's house one night and attack him or something like this. Now, look, I don't like the Obamas and I didn't like Obama's presidency, but at the same time, it would be unfair to blame Michelle Obama and her campaign for the actions of this random person that shows up and does that. I'll be the first to say that. And I don't think the media would be in that case because that's the establishment figure. But if somebody shows up, and maybe breezes through an organization or whatever, or they say they support our organization and then they go and start harassing people, doing crazy things. Look, we don't endorse that. We don't endorse any of of these kinds of tactics or whatnot. And there's crazy people out there that are claim that we did 9/11, that we all got together back then and planned the controlled demolition, and now we're covering it up. I mean, all sorts of accusations. So guilt by association. It happens. Let me just go ahead and play the last clip of Glenn Beck really quick because I want to make sure I got them all. And by the way, they're going to say that we're being immature because I have the Kentucky Fried Chicken graphic. No, that's funny because he looks just like Colonel Sanders right now, and I think it's just a gimmick. And I was going to do that. All right, let's go ahead and play the last one.
The most dangerous time in any regime, especially a radicalized regime, is when it is in collapse. Watch the uber left. Pray that Obama moves to the center. If he does, pray that the Secret Service care for that man. That man is never left alone. He has invited 9/11 truthers into the White House and into his administration. If they believe that he is just another one of these guys, he is in danger.
All right, Obama's in danger. I think he's talking about Van Jones there, I'm trying to remember the story. I mean, there's so much that's happened. But he signed a petition that was in support of a new investigation, and then Obama made him his green jobs czar. Here's the thing, and I'm going to use this as a segue to talk about this.
Yeah.
There's going to be people out there saying, well, so what? Glenn Beck was right. people from the right are going to say this. Glenn Beck was right because the left has gotten so crazy with all the culture war stuff. And I mean, to a certain extent, I agree with it. I think it's just a big distraction. But you've said to me behind the scenes that you think that the rise of Trump was disastrous for the 9/11 truth movement. Now, let me qualify. I don't have any issue with Trump personally. There may be a policy here and there I disagree with. But overall, look, I could take him or RFK Jr. as the next president and work with that. I'm fine with either of those people. So this is not an attack on Trump, but share your thoughts on why the whole Trump phenomenon was disastrous for our particular cause.
Well, I think, it isn't because I would prefer, right now I have the bulk of my contempt is for the other side of the political spectrum right now, despite, my own sort of history. I guess I've been more on the progressive side of things, but as you hinted there, that things are ridiculous now, and now it's the Democrats that are the kind of warmongering party. So but in terms of answering your question, my point, I think, about that was that Donald Trump was perfect for the establishment because he was able, and let's face it, I mean, for 4 years, he was attacked and ridiculed like 24 hours a day on the mainstream media. I mean, I've never quite seen any political figure get that much vitriol that was every single day. I mean, it was way out of proportion with reality. Whatever criticisms, and there are lots of valid criticisms, but the problem was that he became identified as being, he and his followers as being kind of representative of, conspiracy theorists. And so, and I know I ran into some people that did that just as a kind of a knee-jerk thing when they started talking about Trump, and then they just jumped right into conspiracy theorizing, because in their minds, and it was because of conditioning, media conditioning, they had come to associate those things, that the Trumpers and the MAGA people and these crazy right wingers, they're all conspiracy theorists. So that, it's awfully convenient for the establishment that Trump is, he's someone that they were able to associate with conspiracy theorists, and we, of course, are painted as that because that the media have made that term, a term of ridicule. So unfortunately, when people, anybody that sort of, I often get, if I question something, and I'm talking with, people I don't know that well, but it just, things come up. Often the first question I'll get asked is, well, you're one of those MAGA people. And they just think that if I'm asking those questions, I must be one of those. So I think it's been harmful that all these attacks against Trump by the media, that we've kind of been put into that, pile, basically. So, when Trump does things, it kind of, it can come back on us, because that association people have been conditioned to make that association between Trump and all these crazy conspiracy theory people. And I use that term sarcastically, obviously, in case anybody is not realizing that. But so am I answering your question, Andy?
Well, whatever your answer is, again, getting right back to whatever what I was talking about before, the bombastic nature of people. I remember years ago, the meme used to be that there's no difference between the right and the left, and I had this joke going on when I would write for news sites, or even here on FreeFall, when it was Obama versus McCain. I think I just called them collectively McBama, and then when it was Obama versus Romney, it was Robama. It kind of sounds like a giant monster movie. But I would just refer to them as that, because that's what everybody always said. There's really no difference between the two parties. And then when Donald Trump comes, for whatever reason, this becomes a big spectacle. And now you have people saying he's the worst president ever, really worse than the guy that lied us into war, not too long ago, worse than all those presidents that, strengthened the institution of slavery, really worse than that, huh? I mean, you disagree with policies, but, this hyperbole has gotten nuts. And there's going to be people mad at me for saying this right now. But like people on the left and the right, we all work together here at AE 911 Truth. If this stuff came up, it didn't really even come up at all. AE would go to the left forum, but there might be a right-leaning thing that it would go to. Yeah. The whole idea was that we just get out to as many people as possible, but now everybody is so tribal that, like, when I put out my graphic novel and we said Rosie O'Donnell endorsed it, and I'm getting emails back saying, "Oh, count me out, Rosie O'Donnell! How dare you? How dare you? You know what she said about Trump, right?" But then, hey, Tucker Carlson said something supportive of us. Yeah, how dare you? You're getting in bed with Tucker Carlson now. How dare you? You know what he said about left-leaning people? And it's like you can't even get away from it. And again, nuance is out the window.
Yeah.
Looking at things neutrally. Now, look, I learned this a couple of years ago. You don't always have to take a side on every single thing that's out there. People feel this need. Something comes up. I mean, if the mainstream media, if Fox News and MSNBC created a debate, baked potato or mashed, one network took the other side, the other one took the other side, it seems like most of the population would feel that they need to get passionate about this. Baked versus mashed. And then, get mad at the other side for this. And I'm not talking about, fake unity and all this. We're going to stand in the street and hold hands. But, I mean, get your brain together. What's important? Prioritize. 9/11 truth, science, and reason. And I'll work with anybody that has a clean record in terms of no violence and, obviously racism and that kind of stuff is bad, but I wouldn't work with them. But, if somebody just has different political views, I don't care. Look, if the current White House called me right now and said, hey, we're suddenly now interested, we got visited by 3 ghosts and we want to hear about 9/11 truth, our team would be on the first plane out there to make the presentation. And that is with whoever the next president is going to be, Republican or Democrat either. We have one job to do, and it's to get a new investigation for those families and get this acknowledged. Final thoughts, Craig?
Well, I guess I would just say that, one thing I think that the one thing I think the establishment fears the most is the prospect that, that people will find common ground and work together, because, I think that divide and conquer is the primary way. Well, it's one of many tactics, but it's maybe the biggest one. Divide and conquer is used to keep people fighting about things that they really shouldn't be fighting about. A lot of issues that are I think are a lot of things that are stoked by the media. They're just false issues, or they're intentionally divisive. Where you look at what we're focusing on in our society today, and it's identity issues and it's racism and all these things are things that they need a certain amount of attention, of course, but it's all about pitting people against each other. Every difference that we might have, as you said, nuance. We might be able to have a conversation and not always agree about every little thing. But if we can come together, then I think that really scares the powers that be, because that's how they, keep running things. That's how they keep their control. Is that they distract us and they get us fighting amongst ourselves. And so whether it's Tucker Carlson or Rosie O'Donnell, if Tucker Carlson and Rosie O'Donnell and, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders can all get in a room together and, that's all to the good, I think, that's really our only hope. If we fall for this, being at each other's throats over one issue or another, then it's going to be next to impossible to win. But we've got to find common ground and focus on, as you said, the evidence, the science, the evidence, and the politics is part of that. Unfortunately, it's because we don't just have to win the evidence war, because I think we've done that already. Mm-hmm. The task is kind of a political one now. So that's the challenge. But I think the more of these famous people that open their minds to this and are even willing to say a little bit publicly, it just moves things along in a positive way. I don't think it matters who it is.
Absolutely. For the record, we're not talking about this fake unity where you have to unite with people that are crackpots, weirdos, subversives, trying to tear you down and bring you down from within, and you know it, and you don't want anything to do with them. And we're not talking about that. But look, me and Craig disagree on political things. Yeah, me and Craig disagree on political things, but we got an excellent rapport here. I love bringing him on. I love talking to him on the phone for hours, and politics should not be that important. They're important at the voter box and who you send to office and all of that stuff, but don't let it come in around your dinner table. Folks, that is the end of the show. Craig, thank you so much. Again, truthinshadows.com and thoughtcrimesandmisdemeanors.substack.com. Check out those sites, and we'll have you back on soon. Bye.
Great. Thanks, Andy.